Who got the franchise tag and how does that impact their dynasty value? We're talking all that and more on today's episode of Locked On Dynasty.
You are Locked On Dynasty Football, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Here are your hosts, Matt Williamson and Ryan McDowell.
Thanks for making Locked On Dynasty your first listen every day. We are free and available on all platforms. Welcome to the Locked On Dynasty Football Podcast. I'm your host, Ryan McDowell. You can follow me on Twitter at RyanMC23. Joining me, as always, is Matt Williamson. Find Matt on Twitter at WilliamsonNFL. Matt, how are you today?
I'm great, man. How are you? Lots of action around the league. Yeah,
I'm good. I'm not quite as good as Daniel Jones, but I'm doing okay here. We do have some news to talk about, some real news. It feels like it's been dry in the NFL for a few weeks now, but it is time to change that because
it's popping.
The franchise tags are in. We got a couple of new deals done. Let's talk about those very quickly, Matt. Let's start with Dallas. Tony Pollard gets the tag in Dallas. I guess ultimately that's no surprise, although, of course, they still have Ezekiel Elliott. Rumors that Elliott could be cut. The contract is really the issue there. Do you see kind of status quo when it comes to Pollard in Dallas next season?
I think this is a good thing for his stock. I mean, if we truly look at running backs in a dynasty format, almost like redraft, I bet Pollard's a pretty high redraft pick this year. I mean, Elliott's either going to be out of the equation or greatly diminished. And it's a good offense. They put up points every year. I do think the rumors are true that they could add a Hopkins or some kind of weapon. It's a pretty good line. I think Dak's a vastly underrated quarterback. And why not give Pollard a ton of touches and send him on his way after the year? And I think you also avoid the Bijan problem too by this,
That's a good point.
Yeah.
I agree with you. It certainly doesn't hurt Pollard's value. We'll see what happens with Zeke, but honestly, at this point, it probably doesn't matter too much.
Yeah, you're right.
Las Vegas gave the tag to Josh Jacobs. That was actually a few days ago. So a little bit of old news here, but they made it official at the deadline. Again, I think this is probably good news for Josh Jacobs. Honestly, if any of these running backs can avoid hitting the open market, I know that used to be what they really wanted, but at this point, I think they're better off sticking with their teams. And in most situations, this is another one of those. Of course, we'll see what the Raiders do at quarterback. That's kind of the ultimate determining factor here.
Without question. I mean, we don't exactly know what type of offense, who's going to be behind center. But the thing that made me crazy about Jacobs under Gruden was they never threw him the football. So the fact that he's back with McDaniels pretty much ensures he's going to be targeted a fair amount. And that was a great deal of his value last year. So fine. I mean, is he a first-round redraft pick? Probably.
Oh, maybe.
A really good year. Right, yeah.
I've been doing some of these early underdog drafts, of course, best ball and redraft, and we're not seeing too many running backs in the first round at all. But
really,
I do think Jacobs would be a top 5 running back pick. I think that's fair in those redraft leagues. Let's move on to kind of the main news of the past 24 hours or so, because this is what went down to the deadline. And we'll start with the Giants. We kind of knew the situation here. They wanted to keep both Daniel Jones and Saquon Barkley. They only had one tag, so to keep them both, somebody needed to get a deal done, and that happened. Daniel Jones gets a new contract, 4 years, $160 million, with $82 million guaranteed. So he got the big payday. We heard that 45 number tossed around. I think that was probably viewed as the ceiling. He does get the $40 million per year average. I don't know. If I'm a Giants fan, I'm not super excited about this one.
No,
but they were kind of handcuffed, right? I mean, they're a playoff team. They want to be a playoff contender again next year. It was going to be tough to start from scratch at the quarterback position.
Yeah, I mean, first off, kind of like it was with Pollard and Jacobs, franchising a running back is very feasible, as is a tight end. Evan Ingram is
Right.
another one. The number is very easy. It's a 1-year deal. You can revisit it. So that's a very team-friendly move. So that works out better for them. Giving Daniel Jones this money, to me, might be one of the biggest regrets that the Giants have. But that's a Peacock and Williamson conversation. We don't really care what kind of money he gets. He's just going to be the Giants starting quarterback, and they run him. And I think they'll draft a receiver or sign a receiver. So he was quite the fantasy asset last year in New York, and I think those around him will be better. I mean, am I the biggest Daniel Jones supporter out there? Obviously not, by what I just said. But the poor guy probably threw to the worst wide receivers in the league.
Yeah, very fair. And Saquon, like we said about Pollard, about Jacobs, I think sticking with the Giants, sticking with Coach Dable, and that improving offense and improving offensive line is a good thing. Matt, let's move over and talk about the Baltimore Ravens and Lamar Jackson. He does get the tag. They don't get the deal worked out. But they gave him I believe it's called the non-exclusive tag, which means he can go out and basically seek a deal. And then the Ravens would have the option to match or take 2 first-round picks in exchange for Lamar in that case. And as soon as that news comes out, there's a flood of reports. The Falcons are not interested. The Panthers are not interested. The Commanders are not interested. The Raiders are not interested. What is going on here, Matt?
I don't know that I believe any of that. I mean, I understand that he's a hard guy to get a contract done with for several reasons. First off, his mom is his agent. Secondly, maybe most importantly, the Deshaun Watson contract is a terrible one, and he should ask for the same thing because he's got a better resume. But also, what's he going to be worth 3-4 years down the road if he's not as mobile as he is now? And he's had a hard time staying healthy late in the years anyway. So he's a tough one. But I was shocked that it was not the exclusive tag because to me, 2 firsts, I mean, if I were the Giants, I'd give you 2 firsts and instead of the Jones deal. You know what I mean? Or what about the Colts? What about all those teams you mentioned? There's probably others that make perfect sense to me. I mean, that he's a difference maker. 2 firsts is a drop in the bucket. And of course you have to pay him on top of that. And yeah, what I think the Ravens are doing here is that means they let someone else negotiate the deal. We tried to negotiate with you. Frankly, it didn't work. So if someone else decides to negotiate with you, maybe they can come to a different ground. Maybe you're just somebody that's impossible to negotiate with for all the reasons I mentioned, and no one's going to get a deal done because you just think that you're going to get more than you should, which he has every right to. But 2 firsts isn't enough for Lamar Jackson.
Yeah, totally agree. There were very quickly a couple of theories floated around. What you are kind of hinting at there is one of them. The Ravens basically gambling that another team Lamar is going to agree to a deal with another team that is less than that $250 million guaranteed that he wanted. And then they just swoop in and match that deal, whatever that looks like. That was one theory. The other theory, which maybe is kind of tied in with all of this, is that there's some type of collusion. You know, the C word is getting thrown around here, Matt, between NFL team owners, that we're not going down this road of Deshaun Watson. We're not fully guaranteeing deals, even for the best quarterbacks in the league. And I don't know.
There could be some of that.
There could be some of that. That's obviously very messy. That's a big accusation that is being thrown around. And we're certainly not the only ones saying it. But it would make sense that the owners would not want to start that trend of guaranteeing hundreds of millions of dollars, especially when players like Lamar have not been staying on the field for full seasons. So this is it's kind of been on the fringe of getting ugly between Lamar and Baltimore. And it seems like we've still got a ways to go with that. As far as Dynasty, I don't know. Honestly, I don't know if it matters much. I think Lamar's going to put up Lamar type numbers with Baltimore, with Atlanta, with Carolina, with, any team that where he ends up. I think it's more of just the soap opera we're watching now.
Yeah. And if he stays in Baltimore, though, I do think they will actually throw to wide receivers more, get a little more traditional under Todd Monken, who I think is a good coordinator. I think the offense will look different in general, no matter if he ends somewhere else. So the offense will look a little different. So I think his usage will be different next year. I keep saying the word different, but I mean, so I think that's true. Real quick on the collusion thing. What I will say is everyone knows, I mean, the most powerful people in the NFL are the 32 owners. I mean, it's their league, whether we like it or not, whatever. But 31 owners were very, very upset with the Browns when they made that contract.
Sure. Understandably so. Matt, when we come back, we're going to shift the conversation to one of the rookie running backs. We're talking Devon Achane today, and I'm excited to do that.
The midway point of the NBA season is here, and now is the perfect time to download FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because new customers get a no-sweat first bet up to $1,000. That's bonus bets back if your first bet doesn't win. Just download the FanDuel Sportsbook app. Safe, secure, super easy to use. Then you can bet on everything from the money line to point scores to threes drained. There's also every other sport you can imagine. There's so many exclusive bets out there, player props, player points, rebounds, assists, everything you could dream up. Plus, FanDuel even lets you combine your bets for a chance at a bigger payout with a same-game parlay. So don't miss a chance to get your no-sweat first bet up to $1,000 in bonus bets when you go to FanDuel.com/lockedon. That is FanDuel.com/lockedon to learn more. Make every moment more with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA.
Matt, as our rookie profile series continues, we're moving back to the running back position. Devon Achane from Texas A&M. We finally get the official measurements. This was something that many were interested in because he's clearly a small back, an explosive back. He comes in at 5'8", 188 pounds at the NFL Combine last week. He is 21 years old, a 4-star recruit who landed at Texas A&M and had a very solid career there. Matt, we'll get into the production, into some strengths and weaknesses of Achane, but what are your overall impressions on this player as he is set to enter the league?
I think he's very impressive. I mean, in that he has some, at least this past year with Spiller gone at A&M, was basically the workhorse, for a big-time program in a big-time conference at his size. His speed is remarkable. I mean, he is world-class sprinter type speed on the field. And when he gets a crevice, nobody is catching him. All that being said, who that's 5'8" and under 190 pounds has been a major fantasy asset for us. I mean, I think the trend of backs with size get touches is not close to going away. So I think he's a better football player than he is dynasty player.
That's interesting. Yeah, I mean that's the concern. He's clearly not. He's not going to be an every down back. He's not going to be a lead back. I mean, we're not breaking any news with that one. But I do think we have seen these smaller backs over the years, in recent years, play larger and larger roles in their respective offenses. So, that makes me confident that Achane can be one of those guys, that he can have a fantasy impact as well. But yeah, I mean, those are concerns. Maybe it's inconsistent. Maybe it's, I don't know. I'm trying to, Kenny Gainwell, that
right. I think he's
20 point fantasy game one week and barely sees the field the next.
Maybe more big playability than Gainwell, but not as much.
I feel like you're right. I feel like his upside's probably more than that, or is more than that. But there's reasons for concern. You mentioned the production. Freshman season comes in 43 carries, 364 yards, and 5 touchdowns. Has always been able to make that big play, as you talked about, and scored more touchdowns than you might expect given the touches that he had. Also had 5 catches for 97 yards and another score as a freshman. Then as a sophomore, that was 2021, we really see the production ramp up. 130 carries, 910 yards, 9 scores, 24 catches, 261, and another touchdown. And then this past season, as you said, Spiller is gone. Not quite gets the backfield to himself, but certainly was leaned on more in a traditional running back role. 196 carries, over 1,100 yards, 8 touchdowns, 36, 196, and 3 as a receiver. I did get to sit in a little bit on his interview at the Combine. He was a confident guy. He talked about having the best hands of any running back in the class. He thought he was the best receiver in the class. I would not necessarily disagree with him there. Really people were, some of the media folks were really pushing him to make a prediction on his 40 if he would break the record. He didn't go that far, and he did not break the record either, but he did run a 4.32, which was the fastest in the class. Also had a very solid, a disappointing vertical jump. Kind of sat out the rest of the drills, which is no real surprise. Once he showed off that, speed, that's what everybody really cared about. My number one takeaway on Achane from that interview was he said he was going to be working out with the wide receivers, he was going to be doing the wide receiver drills as well as the normal running back drills. And, we think back, I remember that being a big deal when Christian McCaffrey did that. Yeah. And, I don't know if Achane's going to turn out to be the next Christian McCaffrey, but it has to give you confidence in a time where we're valuing pass catching running backs so highly. That's a good sign.
It is. And two nuggets I just want to throw out there when looking at his production here is he's consistently finding the end zone. And I do think some guys have knacks for that. What's he have there? 27, that looks like career touchdowns over 3 years, both running and receiving. And that's great. And I do think that's a positive. But I also think, he's not going to be the short yardage back at the next level, no matter what. And it is harder to score from distance at the next level. He still might be the fastest guy in the field. He still may break 60, 40, 70 yarders, but that's a little bit harder to rely on. And I'm not knocking him as a receiver, but over these past 2 years when he's been used a lot more, he has 60 catches for only about 450 yards, though. I don't see a lot of – I'd like to see more yardage there from a small, unbelievably fast back on 60 catches.
Yeah, that's a very good point, a good note, and, maybe something to be concerned about. Why isn't he getting more yards after the catch compared to what he did, or based on what he did in college? Matt, any other strengths that stand out? I mean, the speed is obvious. He's got, any way you want to judge his speed, he's got it. That immediate burst as soon as he touches the ball. He's got the long speed. Does have solid hands as a pass catcher. Offers some upside as a kick returner as well. Obviously, teams value that, and that helps players like Achane get on the field sooner. Anything else?
One thing I would throw out there, though, is for his size, I'm not comparing him to Derrick Henry. He doesn't go down easy. He can pinball a little bit. He can take a shot from a D lineman, sideways in the hip or thigh and handle it pretty well, especially for a smaller person. So he's not just he's not Dre Archer, he's not or Dexter McCluster. These little skinny dudes that get pushed around out there. He does hold his own physically.
Oh man, you're pulling out some names now. That
one's a Steeler. Yeah.
Those I think those are two names I probably would have never thought of again. Some clear weaknesses here, and we've really kind of mentioned them already. The size is a concern. He's obviously not a 3-down back, not a lead back, as you can imagine. Doesn't offer much when it comes to blocking or pass protection. Really like to hit everything outside from what I saw. Tried to make that big play, and again, no surprise given his size that he's not a power runner. He's not running between the tackles very often, but it sometimes can become a detriment to try to push things outside. with
at the
every
NFL
play
level,
virtually.
Yeah, right. So go ahead. I don't know if you're done there.
No, go ahead. What else?
So in
Achane?
line with that is poor in pass protection worries me because he may be the toughest, most technically sound guy out there. He's always going to be poor in pass protection. I mean, he just doesn't have the length. He doesn't have the mass. An edge rusher comes off the edge with 35-inch arms. He's going to be, T-Rexing him, trying to get his hands on guys. So therefore, it becomes a tell. I mean, if he's in the game on 3rd and 8, you pretty much know he's not protecting. The D coordinator knows they're not protecting. So you show blitz and either make him protect or make the quarterback get it out hot. Like, that worries me because it would be fine if he truly was a Christian McCaffrey-like route runner where he was a true wide receiver, in terms of not just catching the ball. He's very soft hands. But what I need to study is his routes, because those numbers I referenced, about 60 catches for 450 yards or so, implies to me that he's not a very developed route runner, that he's catching screens, he's catching bubbles, just get it in his hands. Well, if you're not good enough in protection, you better be a great route runner that can run wide receiver routes.
That's a very good point. Matt, when we come back, we'll talk about Achane's dynasty value and potential landing spots in the NFL. Thanks for making Locked On Dynasty your first listen every day. Now make your second listen Locked On NFL Draft. Damian Parson and Keith Sanchez provide in-depth coverage of the biggest NFL draft prospects with deep dives into the sleepers and hidden gems that can change your favorite NFL franchise. Find Locked On NFL Draft wherever you get your podcast and on YouTube. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day. Matt, we don't have a great idea necessarily of where Achane will land in the NFL draft. He's certainly not going to be a first rounder. I do think he'll be a day 2 pick, though. I think we'll see him selected in the late second, more likely in the 3rd round.
Agreed.
And given the type of running back he is, where he's going to pair with another back, what are some landing spots that you think might be beneficial for Achane and might help his dynasty value? So we're thinking a team that already has maybe that lead back. I'm seeing Cleveland here. They've got a mid-second, a late 3rd. Of course, they have Nick Chubb, who was actually saw some trade rumors involving Nick Chubb. I don't know if I believe that.
I've heard a small dynasty note. I've heard a couple nuggets that they really love Ford. That I would pick him up now if you can. I mean, I know a lot of leagues are locked, but I think he's got a chance to be a contributor for the Browns. But anyway, sorry.
No, that's a great nugget. Of course, Kareem Hunt is a free agent. Dearness Johnson, I believe, is also a free agent. So
I think so. Yeah.
They need an RB2 option, and if it's not Achane in the 2nd or 3rd round, it certainly could be Jerome Ford, who they drafted last year out of Cincinnati. Any teams stand out here that would pair well or would work well with Achane?
I mean, I'm kind of spitballing off the top of my head, but I think Arizona could use him. He couldn't be any more different than Connor. I don't think Montgomery returns to the Bears, and I think Herbert's probably the starter there, but a big play guy in the Tariq Cohen mold, it kind of makes a little bit of sense. He's not quite Raheem Mostert, but do you think the Niners, and where I'm really going with this is Miami, would love him? Because they love those stick your foot in the ground, run 1,000 miles an hour. Might they look at him as a zone runner that just is explosive as can be?
I don't think the Miami Dolphins have any running backs under contract for
it's a mess, right?
2023 season currently. I think that's the case. So, Miami, Chicago, the teams
Arizona,
Arizona, the teams that have some obvious needs at running back certainly make sense. What about Indianapolis? Obviously, they have JT. Yeah. They trade Naheem Hines.
I was just about to say I'd love him in a dome.
Yeah.
I was thinking Minnesota. I was thinking New Orleans, but I hadn't thought of Indianapolis. Sure. Absolutely. I mean, Philadelphia used a smaller back, right?
Yeah, Indianapolis has a pick in the mid third round, 80 overall. I think that's probably the range where we see Achane drafted. Baltimore has a pick in that range. They're seemingly always interested in running backs, although I don't know that they want one who's going to catch the ball. Minnesota, you mentioned, has a pick in that range. Dallas, possibly. He may be a little too close to Tony Pollard. I think Pollard's obviously a better ball carrier, but Pollard can really do it all. They may not see that as a need. There's going to be some landing spots there that really work well. Washington, 98 overall.
Maybe.
Robinson,
I don't think Gibson will be back a year from now. You know, I mean, I don't think Gibson's in the long-term plans. That's not bad. Real quick back to Indy. I mean, if you draft a quarterback high, I wouldn't mind having a guy like this come in with my rookie quarterback. I can at least dump him the ball. I can get easy completions, maybe create a big play or two. So that would make a little bit of sense to me as well. Maybe Houston with Pierce.
Yeah, that would be another one that would be a good pairing. Let's finish up here with Achane's current dynasty value. We talked about this yesterday as we discussed Anthony Richardson. Our ADP data is that is pre-combine, so not necessarily 100% up to date. We are in the process of collecting some new ADP now, so we'll have that data for you soon. Pre-combine rookie ADP, Achane was 12 overall, so that late first rounder and he was the RB5. In our startup ADP, he was 112 overall and the RB37. Our rankings at DLF have been updated post-combine, of course, and there he's moved up. He's the 8th overall player, and that is in single quarterback leagues, by the way. 8th overall player and the RB4. So certainly does suggest he's gained some value since the combine. I think he's where entering the combine, he was RB4, RB5, somewhere in that maybe 4 to 7 range. I think it's a conversation for that RB3 spot now between Achane and Zach Charbonnet, another player that we'll be talking about soon. So the top 2 rookie running back spots are basically locked up. RB3, I think, is up for grabs. Charbonnet's probably the favorite, but I think Achane narrowed the gap with his performance at the combine.
I'm not fighting you. I'm fighting the rankings on this. I don't see him in that light at all. I mean, I'd rather have Roschon Johnson. I'd rather have Tank Bigsby. I'd much rather have Charbonnet. I mean, I don't think Chase Brown, but maybe Keaton Mitchell. I mean, I want guys with more. I want 210-pound guys. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
History shows that's who gets the football. I don't see this as a. It makes little sense to me why he would be RB4.
A little too gimmicky for you?
Yes, I think so. Yeah. I mean, I think at most he gets 10 touches a game at most.
Yeah, that's fair. That'll do it for today's show. Please make sure you download and subscribe to the podcast on Apple Podcast, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. Subscribe to the Locked On Dynasty channel on YouTube. Remember to follow the show on Twitter at Locked On Dynasty. Follow Matt at Williamson NFL, and I'm Ryan MC23. We'll be back next time with more Locked On Dynasty.